Okay, at least we got a little bit of chatter started. I've also put up captions here. They'll automatically generate from Google Slides, but without any punctuation, so read at your own risk. All right. Thank you all. It's nice to see you this morning. Thank you to Mike, Philip, Wendy, Ann, and Alexa for opening this conference and for the invitation to speak this morning. Since we are here at the very beginning of this event, and I just asked you to meet your neighbors, I would also like to ask you to activate your brains along with those social skills a bit. So we'll start with a quick word association. Where does your brain go when you consider the word body or bodies? I'd really like you to just take 30 or 45 seconds and write down on your phone or a piece of paper. You all got these wonderful pens and notepads when you checked in. As many different ideas, connections, phrases, definitions as you can. No wrong answers here. Really just sort of a quick 45-second brainstorm. It's amazing how long 30 seconds can feel. And now I'll ask you to be a bit brave if you've sat next to someone you don't know, and a little less brave if you do know the person nearest to you. And just spend a minute sharing what you wrote down with each other. Just the words if discussion happens, but let's just try and take your one list and expand it up into two. Start talking, it's amazing how quickly a minute can pass. Thank you all for your willingness to also enter into that request and that opening as willingly as you did. I think it bodes well for the rest of our time together and your willingness to explore things. Chances are you might have considered the body as a noun. What is a body made of? Or you thought about what a body does, how it functions. Or maybe you thought about alternate bodies, bodies other than human bodies, bodies other than your own. There will be hundreds of words in this room that didn't make it up on these slides, and your answers are a product of your own lived experience in your body. Today, I'll be speaking about a project I'm running here at Carnegie Mellon called Inhospitable Bodies. This 3-year initiative, of which I'm in year 2, investigates the ways in which a body welcomes and is welcomed in certain spaces. Alternately, it asks, how are bodies unwelcomed, excluded, or devalued in certain situations, settings, and systems? In particular, I'm interested in the ways that a figurative body interacts with the literal body. There are a number of events and initiatives that are hosted through this project, but today's focus is on the concert I hope many of you will attend this evening. This morning, I'll discuss how Inhospitable Bodies came to be, after which I'll focus on this new piece I wrote called 1 in 4, 1 in 8, composed as part of the initiative. It will have its public premiere tonight at the Mellon Institute, which was mentioned in our opening addresses, and I really encourage you all to come and hear the music, be part of the first public performance of this piece, and to join the reception to follow. After I talk about the piece, I'll lay out some thoughts and larger impacts or applications of this kind of work in other areas, which should ideally leave us plenty of time for your questions. Inhospitable Bodies came out of a convergence of two primary, but what I thought were disparate parts of my life. The constant background buzz in my field of music composition that composers who were women really didn't belong and aren't valued the same way as men are, and my own personal experience with infertility and pregnancy loss while trying to have a kid. That's me, there I am, in the middle. At first glance, the two sides seem unconnected, but they're linked through a historical socialization which has told me through example that who I am, because of my body, I don't belong in these places where I do in fact actually exist. I'm not sure how many of you know this, but music composition remains the most gender imbalanced field in higher ed when it comes to faculty positions, not just in the arts, but arts, STEM, everything combined. In symphony orchestras too, the gender distribution is about 30 to 40% female and 60 to 70% male for musicians, but leadership positions by sections, so principal roles, concertmaster, the first violin, etc., are predominantly held by men. For conductors and music directors, the people in the most visible, literally elevated position on the stage, the data is disappointing. A report on equality and diversity in global repertoire from 2023-2024 surveyed 111 orchestras across 30 countries. Of the over 16,000 compositions that were performed, 7.5% of those works were composed by women. Less than 0.1% of the works were written by non-binary composers. I'm a slide behind. No, I'm not. Just kidding. In the US, the data is slightly less bad. In 24-25, the top 21 orchestras in the United States by budget programmed concerts where 23.8% of the composers represented were women. But if we account for composers who have multiple pieces featured in a season, compositions written by women actually only account for a little under 14% of the works. Beethoven's Third Symphony was performed by almost half, 10, of the ensembles surveyed just last year. Just the one symphony. Taking out these and other repeat performances, less than 10% of the performances are of works by women, 9.7% of the total. Or what I think is the real kicker, the combined performances of works by just Beethoven and Mozart equal 12 more than all of the works by women combined in these orchestras. So, how did this happen? Why does it happen? There are a number of impacting factors here, but regardless of the reasons, the message coming through to a general public, to young people aspiring to be composers, to professional composers who are working for recognition in their field, the data tells us all that there is less recognition and value of women than men in orchestral music, which is really the most visible and financially lucrative ensemble to write for in the field. The figurative body here is inhospitable to a category of people who are linked by qualities of their lived-in body. In America Ferrera's monologue in the Barbie movie, she talks about the pinpoint of acceptable behavior according to society's expectations for women, an impossible standard of being great, but not so great that you are a threat. And in music, we're all compared to greatness, the unending struggle of measuring up to the proverbial Beethovens and Mozarts. Ferrera's words rang true to me as a woman, of course, but I found myself also mapping the language onto my career as a composer. We'll hear it.
Like, we have to always be extraordinary, but somehow we're always doing it wrong. You have to be thin, but not too thin. And you can never say you want to be thin. You have to say you want to be healthy, but also you have to be thin. You have to have money, but you can't ask for money, because that's crass. You have to be a boss, but you can't be mean. You have to lead, but you can't squash other people's ideas. You're supposed to love being a mother, but don't talk about your kids all the damn time. You have to be a career woman, but also always be looking out for other people. You have to answer for men's bad behavior, which is insane, but if you point that out, you're accused of complaining. You're supposed to stay pretty for men, but not so pretty that you tempt them too much or that you threaten other women, because you're supposed to be a part of the sisterhood, but always stand out and always be grateful. But never forget that the system is rigged, so find a way to acknowledge that, but also always be grateful. You have to never get old, never be rude, never show off, never be selfish, never fall down, never fail, never show fear, never get out of line. It's too hard, it's too contradictory, and nobody gives you a medal or says thank you. And it turns out, in fact, that not only are you doing everything wrong, but also everything is your fault. I'm just so tired of watching myself and every single other woman tie herself into knots so that people will like us.
In my education, I had been conditioned.
We have to always
Go again. There we go. In my education, I had been cautioned by female composition teachers, nonetheless, about being too political, too emotional, about writing music that was too pretty because people wouldn't think it was smart, or being told to write intellectually challenging music so that it was appealing to my male colleagues. I was told to be grateful for the opportunities I had and not make too much noise asking for anything else. I was chided for pursuing research in ethnomusicology over theory or computer music as a secondary study focus. My models of women who had success in their careers and children were few and far between, and almost none of them were composers. In short, the model of who counts in almost all areas of classical concert music largely doesn't point at a body like the one I'm in or a creative voice like the one I have. I recognize also that my whiteness affords me an incredible amount of privilege in Western classical music. The statistics for representation among Black, Indigenous, mixed heritage, Asian, and Middle Eastern composers shows a deeper imbalance than the one of gender. And despite the odds working against me, I got to a point where I felt like my career had enough momentum that if my husband and I timed it right, I could have a baby and not lose too much steam on the professional side of things. Or so I thought. For me and roughly 18% of people worldwide, getting pregnant wasn't just a thing you did. And so while in my job, I was trying to figure out who I was and how I belonged, while people told me who I was didn't belong, I was also realizing that my body also didn't fit in the societal expectation when it came to growing humans. We all have been socialized in a way that tells us women are here in service of others, and in particular, in service of sustaining the human race. We hear from an early age that our bodies are built for this, that it's such a natural thing to want to become a mother. Being a mother is the highest calling a person can have. We hear phrases like the miracle of childbirth, or that a pregnant person is glowing. I recognize that this experience is true for so many people, and I don't discount that or their belief of those things. It's just that it doesn't go that way for everyone. So when a path of value is laid out for you from the earliest ages, and then it turns out you and your body don't fit on that path, it can feel really isolating. In my case, one exacerbated the other. And so my solution came to be inhospitable bodies. This setup gets to the first of two big anchoring ideas to what I'm offering today. That our research, the work we do, the what we know, is a product of who we are and how we know things. Put another way, how do you show up in your work? This question is likely not surprising to many of you, but it's one I've carried around with me for the bulk of my professional career. And the follow-up to that question is who sees that or knows it? Who hears it? How is it visible or audible? Why does it matter? To whom? My models for this kind of coexistence of what we know and who we are come actually primarily from science writing. Authors who helped me understand what they know through their writing, strengthened by the threads of who they are and how they came to know these things. Some examples are up here, and I highly recommend all of these as reads. Robin Wall-Kimmerer, in Braiding Sweetgrass, works to find the middle of her love of natural sciences and her expertise in natural sciences and her indigenous heritage. Suzanne Simard, in Finding the Mother Tree, reveals her discovery of nutrient-distributing trees in old-growth forests, paired with her experience as a woman growing up in the logging industry in Canada. In Hawaiki Rising, Sam Lowe teaches readers about Polynesian wayfinding practices, not as a how-to, but documenting how the knowledge was passed from teacher to student as he helped crew a replica of an ancient Hawaiian va'a traveling between Hawaii and Tahiti. Helen Shursky in The Blue Machine, How the Ocean Works, Caroline Criado Perez in Invisible Women, and the current book I'm reading, Our Moon by Rebecca Boyle, all of them move so effortlessly between knowledge and the experience of uncovering and understanding that knowledge. Literally where they were when they learned these things, who they talked to, what that conversation or that environment was like. They model in their work the second anchoring idea of today, that we can be honest and transparent and purposeful about our connection to our work without detracting from its value or positive contribution to the field we're working in. So if the question of how you fit into your work isn't one you've asked yourself yet, give it a try and give some thought to the ways in which external factors have driven the answer to what is an incredibly personal question. How much of our own identity do we write out of our art or our research because of a figurative body governing the ways because of a figurative body which governs the ways our work does or doesn't count? What are the ways that we as researchers and makers and doers can counteract that pressure? How can we make new pathways for alternate modes of inquiry? For me, one of those alternate pathways is this piece that I'll talk about for the bulk of my presentation this morning and this concert tonight, which is called 1 in 4, 1 in 8. In building the Inhospitable Bodies Project, and more specifically 1 in 4, 1 in 8, I did some research about what work already exists that explores both music and medicine or music and body-related science. People have been exploring the connections between music and body-related science in some pretty interesting ways. Some of my favorites are Alexandria Smith, a multimedia artist in Georgia who designs and performs with wearable electronics, which measure biological data and create live processed sound. Some of her pieces are titled things like Hearing Vision or Heart Music. There's also a piece called Palpitations. Molly Joyce explores disability as a creative resource, and her upcoming album uses surgical records as lyrics for some of her new work. Composer Alvin Lucier also was a pioneer of the work. In the 1960s, he was experimenting with sensors to measure his biological data and create pieces for percussion, which is pictured up here. And he made posthumous headlines after he donated his blood before he died, and a team in Australia converted the blood into stem cells and then cerebral organoids, which mimicked the brain. The material generated from his sort of fabricated brain accompanies an art installation there called revivification. Collaborations between neuroscience and musicians are trying to map what happens in the brain when we listen to, perform, and even compose music. We have access to incredibly compelling creative work which integrates sonic material generated by the body or where data collected helps organize musical sound. Music and motherhood or birth or parenthood projects are also not new. References to motherhood and or children exist all over the place in classical music. Some highlights include Robert Schumann's, back in the 1840s, wrote a song cycle for mezzo-soprano and piano called Frauenliebe und Leben, which means a woman's life and love. It traces the arc of a woman falling in love, getting married, and having a baby. Text written by also a man. A number of composers since then have written pieces that explicitly engage the loss of a child, including Gustav Mahler, Amy Beach, Florence Price, and George Rothberg, though the Mahler and the Rothberg are definitely the most famous of these on this list, but also generally when we think about the work in historical spaces. In the 2010s, I heard a performance of James McMillan's 1988 work, Quickening. It's a stunningly beautiful piece, a real epic work of contemporary choral and orchestral writing. I heard it around the time that I got married and was starting to think about having children, and it was not lost on me that the first piece I heard that was really about becoming a parent, and in James McMillan's words, the phenomenon of childbirth was, written by a man, with text written by a man, featuring an ensemble of 5 vocal soloists in range that are most commonly sung by men, a children's choir, which at the premiere was the Westminster Cathedral Boys Choir, conducted by a man. Again, the model here shows me that in this field, something that so significantly involves someone other than a man is presented and valued publicly by a performance that relies so heavily on bodies, again, that don't match mine. In 2020, though, 2 years into my own journey to attempt motherhood, I learned of Diametrically Composed, a collection of newly commissioned works for flute, voice, and piano, exploring the duality of being a mother and an artist. It was conceived and produced by flutist and composer Alison Loggins Hull, collaborators Paola Prestini, Sarah Kirkland Snyder, Jessica Meyer, Alicia Hall-Moran, and Gabriela Martinez, and they gave this stunning performance of really incredibly powerful and intricate works. Part of me was over the moon. A group of composers way more established than myself took the risk and claimed space for a topic that has really never had any representation in the field. Through their work, they made a statement that they and their bodies belong in the space of new music. The collaboration insisted that composers could shine by engaging their creative work alongside or as part of being a woman in this field and this world. The other part of me was still a little sad. What about those of us who are just trying to become mothers? Diametrically Composed offered a model of what could count in classical music, but I still saw a hole in the representation. Where was the piece that explored the duality of being an artist and just trying to become a mother? I wanted this project that I was working on to represent something about my own experience of these atomic clashes between the bodied, personal, visceral, and the procedural, medical, and detached. I also wanted it to represent the coexistence of the highly individualized, subjective experience and the institutional medical information that overwhelmed my brain for all of that time. So the Venn diagram returns. Before, it was about being a woman in music and being a woman in society. In the experience of trying to have children, the Venn diagram highlights a friction between the personal experience and the procedural interventions. And now, with this composition at the center, I highlight the coexistence of the deeply subjective and the factually grounded, to bring audience members into a version of an experience which swings between music and medicine in a way that I hadn't yet seen represented in music. And you can replace infertility or pregnancy loss with so many different topics here. Chronic illness, disability, neurodivergence, gender, race, aging. I built the project to engage these topics specifically, but I wanted to make sure that there was a way to have other bodies in mind too. So 1 in 4, 1 in 8 is a 60-minute concert which features a new 4-movement piece that I composed for the San Antonio-based piano quartet Agorita. Before each movement, a narrator, which will be me tonight, shares information related to infertility and pregnancy loss. This performance that you'll hear tonight is a bit of a pared down version, but in the fall, Agorita will be back here in Pittsburgh for 3 more performances. Those events will feature an expanded concert footprint, so pre and post-concert talks, creative data visualization from a commissioned visual artist, and post-concert archival collection from audiences. I'm pairing with organizations all throughout Pittsburgh, trying to expand the community and the reach of this project, so it's not just engaging a new music community only, but really trying to find spaces and people who would be interested in this topic outside of the typical new music concert space. One of my favorite podcasts is called Ologies, hosted by Allie Ward, where she asks smart people stupid questions. Those are her words, not mine. And most of the questions really aren't that stupid. It's a wonderful podcast. I highly recommend it. And in the earliest seasons of the podcast, she asked her guests the same set of questions at the end of each episode, 2 of which are, what is your favorite thing about your job? And what is your least favorite thing about your job? And as anyone who dreams of being a guest on a podcast they admire, I also imagine how I might answer these questions in case Allie Ward ever asked them. For me, the answer for both questions is the same. I love music, teaching music, composing music, because we all get to choose and craft our own way in. It develops a kind of personal connections for us as listeners, which means we have songs that can make us laugh or tear up at the first hint of that sound. We attach music to our memories. We know which songs boost our mood or fire us up. The hardest part of my job is the fact that we all get to choose our own way in. I can't make you feel a certain way with the sounds I write. I can just tee up a good space for you to find something of yourself in the moment if you choose to be moved by the experience. Sure, there are certain sounds that people are conditioned to react to in certain ways, especially if you're drawing from a predominantly Western, predominantly tonal listening list. But even then, I can write what I think is the saddest piece of music ever, and whether or not you have that reaction is fully up to you. But it also makes it pretty hard to figure out how to write a piece like this. Because the goal of the piece wasn't to make you feel specific things, what then is an alternate framing for the aims of the project? The answer is actually summarized pretty well in some pre-composition sketching and note-taking I did back in July of 2020. This project has been a long time coming. So here I wrote in my messy, messy handwriting, in the spirit of making more space for women and non-cisgendered men in art, I want to write a piece that puts the prevalent but rarely talked about topics of infertility and miscarriage right in front of an audience, not to make them feel uncomfortable, but to make space to talk about a thing that our society doesn't really share about. What I did know about what I wanted was that I couldn't put the science into the music. The two had to exist on equal planes. I didn't want to leave any room for misunderstanding or misinterpretation in terms of the factual information. Instead, I imagined that sound and science could enhance and grow out of one another instead of using one to communicate the other. Considering again this perennial question of how do I show up in the work I do, I wanted the music itself to harness aspects of the embodied experience. Music taps into our physiological bodies through manipulations of rhythm, tempo, register, and phrasing, so there's a lot of potential for creating a sense of feeling through our corporeal and neurological desire for entrainment as human beings. I did a lot of brainstorming about my own experience to try and figure out what I wanted to or could capture in sound. I considered what might be common to the experience of others and what elements those who weren't directly impacted by these topics might be able to identify with. Again, trying to think of ways to bring in as wide a reaching audience as possible, not to make anybody feel comfortable or to isolate anybody, but instead to then think about expanding that reach. About 2 years ago, I started speaking with Dr. Gabriella Gossman and Dr. Pamela Parker, who are both specialists in reproductive endocrinology and infertility at UPMC Mägi Women's Hospital here in Pittsburgh. They're actually just right down the street. I interviewed them a few times and asked them to share information about infertility and pregnancy loss. My questions ran a gamut from history, word origins, new research, their biggest frustrations about our health insurance system, the way that language unnecessarily assigns value, femtech, and the way the internet has both empowered and misinformed their patients. I also gathered information from the American Society for Reproductive Medicine at the encouragement from Drs. Parker and Gossman, as well as some published studies from the NIH and collected data from the CDC. When all was said and done, I had collected some 30,000 words through interviews and pages of notes from the ASRM, NIH, and CDC. In my initial scope of this project, I had thought that the format of the concert would cleanly alternate between music and facts, just a clear line between one and the other. As the piece took shape, though, I softened my scope on the binary switch between the two. I was already asking people to hold two very different lines of thoughts at the same time in the concert with the music and the medicine. If I reimagined the shape and thrust of this intermovement speaking, I could more conscientiously and carefully bring the audience through the piece. So you'll hear this evening some really clear, unbiased statistical information. You'll also hear more personal language or qualitative data. To smooth out the motion between the medicine and music, I also include a bit of listening context to glue the science and the sound to one another. So now I'll go through a brief overview of each of these four movements with some accompanying sound excerpts just to get your ears a little used to the sound world of what happens here. The concert begins with bodies, similar to the way I began this talk. Bodies that contain our insides, systems working constantly without our ever knowing, and systems mostly out of our control, keeping us alive. It turns the audience's attention to the topical material through this thing we all have in common, our bodies. This opening text also primes some vocabulary, and I let the audience know that 1 in 8 people in the US need some kind of medical assistance to become pregnant. So this is the second part of that title. The music of Antecedent, which is the first movement, is brimming with potential energy and anticipation. I wanted to start the piece bold and declarative, strong, sure of itself. Things feel easy in this movement. It is unencumbered. So here's the opening motive or cell of material that starts the very first moment of the piece, and it's actually carried through the rest of the movements as well. So this footage is actually from about 10 days ago. I went down to San Antonio, which is where Agreed is based, and we had like an invited, basically open rehearsal. So there were maybe 15 people in the room, just to give the quartet the practice of working through the whole concert, which is why you see other people there. So this opening moment, it has direction, it has an identity, but it also doesn't have a lot of context yet. It's only the beginning of the piece. The rest of the movement flows freely, wide and open, and even in the moments where it gets stuck, there's still forward motion, a direction toward something. And here's an example of what I mean by that sort of sticky sound, but still having motion. Between the first and second movements, audiences hear about time. I wanted to share information about the time it takes to go through an assisted reproductive cycle, which at its shortest can take 5 to 7 months just to arrive at the beginning of a pregnancy. I also wanted to talk about disruptions, cancellations, and delays. Additionally, I brought in this sense of an external manipulation or control. While our bodies work through a series of mechanistic processes internally, part of ART is an external overtaking of some of the natural clocks in a person's body in order to create an ideally hospitable environment for pregnancy. With this movement, the words that I had sketched out to describe the sounds I wanted were slingshot, looping, phasing, starting over, not lining up. Again, different sort of experiences of time. Fissure to flow centers on an effort to find temporal alignment, to get on the same page of groove or beat or ideas. The movement never really sounds upsettingly out of sync as the performers reach for ensemble with one another through lyrical, intertwining gestures. There's a recurring idea of the solo stretch, as I call it, first in the viola and twice later in the violin, where the individual players have total autonomy on the timing and unfolding of their line. Here's what the opening violin line sounds like. variation or modification of that idea now in the violin. These lines are always in search of a kind of grace in their unfolding, looking for musicality, but stopping and starting, getting overwhelmed by the momentum of the musical motion. In the latter half of the movement, when the whole ensemble finally locks in with one another, the satisfaction of lining up is a metric for just how offset everything was in the time before then. It's a really special moment that I'm not going to play now, just as an incentive for you to come hear the piece live this afternoon or evening. The third movement was the hardest one to write. The text that leads up to it shares some statistics anchored by the fact that 1 in 4 known pregnancies ends in a loss, which is the other half of the title of the piece. About 50% of the time with these losses, doctors don't know why it happens. And for the times when they do know what happened, the reasons are not ones that a person could actually control. After Fissure to Flow, the previous movement, which is all about wrestling with cycles and timing, somatic drift taps into a different aspect of losing control over one's own body. The movement is difficult because even though grief and grieving are a human universal experience, the way we all go through and process those things is so deeply personal and specific. We all choose our own way in. As I was thinking about this movement, though, I kept going back to a story I heard 7 years ago. Tahlequah is an orca whale whose home is predominantly in the Pacific Northwest. She made headlines after she carried her dead calf for 17 days and over 1,000 miles in 2018. It was a devastating gesture of mourning as she nudged her calf to the surface for more than 2 weeks, keeping the ocean from swallowing the baby into the ecosystem of the sea. I remember following her journey via news articles and whale research institutes and crying at every single thing I read. And today I still can't bring myself to share an image of her and her calf for this presentation. The calf mortality rate for orcas is 50% in the first year of life. In December 2024, just last year, scientists spotted Tahlequah with a new calf swimming alongside her. I was so glad to read this news. But on New Year's Eve of last year, the calf was confirmed dead, and Tahlequah was, for a second time, pushing her baby to the surface, carrying her grief. The Center for Whale Research confirmed in early February of this year that the calf was no longer with her. In the concert, I say that this movement is about loss, but it's also about being lost. I wanted to create this sense of distance and disorientation, almost like your ears are plugged after a flight. I hope none of you are experiencing that right now. It's the worst feeling in the world. Or that you have water stuck in them. So far away, but without a real direction of where things are or where things are coming from. You'll notice in this movement that the string players put on a heavy practice mute on their strings, which they use to practice their instrument in spaces where they can't play at full volume, like hotel rooms or offices, etc. It's never something used in performance, save for 1 or 2 particularly adventurous pieces of contemporary music, and now this piece. It creates, unsurprisingly, a really muted sound without sacrificing any of the clarity of pitch. So here's actually what the violin sounds like with the practice mute on. Far away, detached, sort of plugged up, but still clear. piece never really stops moving. It sinks and thrashes and gets pulled along by the currents. It gives into the darkness, allows for the rage. It gets lost, it's isolated. But there's a ticking pattern of time that is unrelenting in its return, an insistent reminder that it will move forward no matter what. And in this next excerpt, the music morphs out of some of that sort of timeless undulation into the ticking pattern in the piano, and then with the practice mutes on the strings again, so you can hear that sound, the muted sound with the ticking time. Grief is something we can feel so viscerally in our bodies, but I wanted somatic drift to tap into a sense of detachment, but also sort of being tethered to something, like floating along and occasionally yanked back in the opposite direction when you reach the end of the rope. It's kind of clunky and dark. It's not graceful. It is meant to tap into the feelings of isolation and aloneness. The last movement, Fortified, is not about hope, it's about information. So what I offer before the movement begins as statistics, success rates, number of babies born via IVF in the US, statistical possibilities for pregnancy after miscarriage. I share information about cost, insurance coverage, what research is happening and how much research is yet to be done. In so many ways, my own journey through infertility and loss made me feel detached and disconnected from both the real world and my body. The last movement was about grounding, feeling the dirt beneath my feet, recognizing that my body carries me through this life every day, reconnecting with what it feels like to take a full, slow, deep breath. In all of the ways that the piece so far was meant to tap into the embodied experiences, everything up until this point kind of felt like it was reaching up or out or away. Fortified became a challenge to think about how I could stretch down and in. So here's an example of what I mean by this sort of groundedness of the sound. Transition. It's not a return or a recapitulation, but instead a revisiting and exchange of musical material with the understanding that it will never function again as it did when we first heard it. If you'll recall, the opening of the first movement sounded like this. And now the opening of the fourth movement begins this way. Similar, but different. It has changed. The mission of the piece was to create space for knowledge and a resonating chamber for experience in the same concert. It was a serious journey to write this piece, and I recognize that I'm asking audiences to also commit to a pretty lengthy journey in listening to it unfold. Each part of Inhospitable Bodies is a provocation, a model, or an answer to the ideas that anchor this talk. 1 in 4, 1 in 8 is an antidote for one small slice of the bigger picture. It puts the topic of infertility and pregnancy loss both in explicit, objective ways and through more subjective bodied lenses right in front of a person. I hope that people learn something, are better able to understand a person they might know who is going through or has gone through these things. I hope others feel their experience recognized and acknowledged, that there's space for them to exist where there hasn't been before. I hope others see a model for science and new music sharing space in a concert, and that the model is a challenge to the historically accepted bodies, topics, and voices in the concert hall. These impacts are one example of what could be made possible for projects such as these, which combine other arts and creative making with more STEM-anchored fields and topics. 1 in 4, 1 in 8 is a case study for a larger goal, to lower the barriers to collaborative, interdisciplinary work which reaches audience beyond its typical scope. In this moment, research and education are under incredible scrutiny here in the United States in particular. Accurate information is losing out to misinformation and exaggeration and sensationalizing language. I really believe that there's an incredibly rich resource for which we have barely scratched the surface in collaborative art and science projects. How can we build reciprocal systems between these areas such that people can move more flexibly around, between, and through one and the other as a way of understanding, engaging, empathizing, and validating the incredible multitude of ways that bodies exist in this world? One of the ways I'm most excited about the reach of this project is through the enthusiasm of my partners in the medical field who are supporting this piece as a resource for their patients. As narrative medicine continues to take a stronger hold in developing plans for care, doctors are looking for ways to support people beyond procedures and prescriptions. They recognize that healing requires the scope of a full human being, not just their injury, ailment, or condition. I'm encouraged by their willingness to include music like this piece as a resource in a plan of care. In the first part of this presentation, I posed some anchoring tenets as the wide-reaching takeaways for today. 1 in 4, 1 in 8 shows through its example that there's a place for art and science alongside one another in the work we do. It shows that the work we do is a product of who we are and how we know things. The piece is a model for how research and creativity coexist in creative practice, and that we can be transparent about our connection to the work without detracting from its value or contributions. The composition is just one of many, many ways that our work can push the comfortable boundaries, the inhospitable bodies which tell us how to belong and who counts. There's so much room to explore the coexistence of art and science on an equal plane, and I know that we will be able to hear so many examples of this good work in our 3 days together in the conference. I thank you for your time and your attention this morning and look forward to taking your questions. They're here. 1, 2. Don't all go at once.
Big sides. Thank you. This is one on? Yeah, it's on. Okay, Tamsin's got this side. I have this side. Questions?
Hello, my name is Janka. I'm from Hungary. I'm a scholar and designer. Very impressive work. My question is, could you tell us a bit more about how you shaped the language when talking to the scientists?
Yeah, so the conversations with Dr. Grossman and Parker, I really tried to let them talk as much as they wanted to, and so in my own experience and practice in ethnomusicology, I've been trained, I guess, one of the sort of foundational questions was not to ask, or one of the foundational elements was not to ask for the things that you wanted, but to sort of keep an open mind. And so really in the first 2 interviews with them, I did my best to ask them to tell me whatever they wanted people to know. So a lot of it was, what are the things that you wish people knew more about the work you do or the things that you know? So where are the sort of discrepancies between the really specialized work that is done within that very unique space amongst doctors, and what are the things that you wish more people knew more widely, or things that you wanted to sort of clarify or make specific. And so once, after those first 2 interviews, I sort of took that data and looked through it, and then the third interview, once I sort of had the 4 movements, which I explained to them and sort of talked about how the 4 different sort of experiences went in the piece, we then shifted the conversation a little bit to talk more about those specific kinds of things. So things related to timing, or things related to loss, or things related to sort of what comes next. And so it was a collaborative process as much as it could, but also really wanting to make sure that there was so much that I don't know about the field, right? And so when you have the opportunity to ask experts who know so many things, to really provide a space for them to say the things that they want to be able to say about it. Thanks.
I think this hand was just before.
Hi, my name is Sheila. I'm a composition instructor at Central Washington University, and in my classroom we talk about how language is devalued in the classroom. And so in your interviews with the different medical professionals, how have you noticed how language is devalued in the medical field or in any of the texts that you've read?
Yeah, I love that question. I think the thing that I noticed a lot was there's terms and terminology that are used when doctors are speaking to doctors. There are terms and terminology that are used when doctors are speaking to health insurance companies, right? So like coding for certain kinds of procedures, which don't always line up. And then there are terms and terminology that is used when doctors are speaking to patients. And they actually talked a lot about part of the plan of care is getting to know their patients and know the kinds of the sort of like levels of interest and engagement and vocabulary that the patients want to be able to use. And so they talked a lot about being really specific for each person who comes in to say, okay, well, if somebody has, experience in a related field, they might have more terminology available to them. So they might use more of the medical terminology versus a more general explanation of things. But they were also very, very careful to make sure that they didn't leave information out, but just shifted, sort of provided more definitions instead of terminology, if that makes sense. The thing that was really fascinating to me was how crass some of the terminology and like really just sort of devaluing the terminology is for health insurance coding. There's a whole bunch of words in there that they really loathe to use also, and it definitely represents also a historical development of the field. A lot of these terms were decided by men, and so even just the word miscarriage is sort of a messy word because it sounds like you accidentally dropped something, like it's if you really think about it, it's a pretty miserable word. So there's a lot of conversations about how language invites or excludes people into the conversation.
Hi, Tammy Huntington, music professor from Indiana Wesleyan University. And first I just want to say thank you so much for embracing who you are and modeling, pouring that into what you do. My colleague Philip Stewart and I were just talking about that at breakfast this morning and how musicians forge our own way. And I love that. And I can't wait for the concert tonight. So this is a huge undertaking. And I'm just wondering if you would care to share a little bit about how you managed to achieve funding for the years and hours that it took for this project.
Sure. Sorry, I never forget I have to stand in front of the microphone. Yeah, so there's two sort of primary funders for this project, and so I actually started talking with Agurita about this project back in 2018 or 2019 because the members of the quartet, so the violinist, Sarah Mansky is actually an alum of Carnegie Mellon. We were roommates in our freshman year of college here together. So we've known each other for a long, long time, and you know, we're all sort of like in the late 20s, early 30s part of our life. I'm now in my late 30s, but you know, in this place where we're all trying to figure out what's next. And so the members of the quartet have also had their own experiences with infertility and pregnancy loss, or secondary infertility, or not being able to have a baby in the schedule that you thought it would happen. And so the conversation really started then of just like, is there a way that we could put these two things, you know, could we put this topic that's so prevalent, that's statistically so prevalent, you know, in our society, in our communities, in this room right now, into the space of a concert. And Agurita's mission is always to do adventurous programming and to bring their programming into communities and spaces that wouldn't normally easily be able to access classical music. So it was a really natural collaboration then. But you're very much right that the funding of it is what held us up. So I was sort of always brainstorming it, but the hospitality initiative through the Center for Arts and Society was really the first thing that allowed us to actually press go on it, and to make at least one performance happen. So we have to pay the performers. I also ideally should get paid as a composer because it takes a lot of time and energy. And so the hospitality initiative was what sort of greenlit this in earnest. And then I've been applying for funding in all sorts of places. So UPMC, Mägi Women's Hospital, is financially supporting some of this. And so in October, we'll actually do a performance at UPMC Mägi Women's Hospital. And then I also, I earned a grant from the MAP Fund, which really sort of pushed me over the edge to be able to expand the scope of the project. And the MAP Fund also sort of, their initiative is to fund arts projects performing sort of temporal arts, so drama, dance, music, theater, projects that are doing sort of adventurous things that can't find logical funding in other places. And because this project sits so close to the third rail of sort of the pro-choice, pro-life debate and a lot of things that are happening politically in our country, the language gets too close to some things for some projects to fund. So I was really grateful that the CAS initiative supported the project, and then the MAP Fund really made it happen.
Do this hand and then that hand, no, probably. Yeah. We'll see.
Hi, my name is Marissa. I'm actually not a music person. I
Love
teach
it.
in education. I'm a disability studies and education scholar. And I found this to be really wonderful. Just your whole framework, everything you're doing with, bringing yourself to your work. And I had a question because there was something you said about this, the music part could apply to other aspects of life. And particularly what got me was you said neurodivergence. I was like, well, something I study, and I am neurodivergent, and all this stuff. And so I wanted to know, so you've set this up very intentionally to have these vignettes of, before every part, right? Do you envision there would be a potential to change those to fit a different narrative where the music would still work?
I love this question, and in my brain, my immediate brain space, my reaction is why not? As long as it, I think it's a really interesting thing to think about, because the sort of where the music came from for me right? You all have now the experience of where the music came from for me, but that doesn't happen if you're, like, it's not a thing that I sort of share widely in the space of performance. So you've got like a sneak peek, backstage view kind of thing. And it's less important that somebody knows why I made it than how that the space sort of opens them up to explore something of themselves. So maybe there is a version of that where some aspects, you know, the elements could change, the language could change between the movements to engage other communities. Yeah, maybe, possibly, yes, with an asterisk. I would love to try and think about being more explicit about folding in that information in between the movements. Yeah.
This will be our last question.
Hi, Catherine. My name is Sarah Kervorst. I also work here at CME, so it's super nice to connect with you.
I love it.
Yeah. You talked about wanting to collaborate with other organizations here in Pittsburgh, so that way this work is reaching more folks than in the new music community.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you're going about choosing partners, if it's location, population, interest-based, and then how you're approaching those collaborations with those partners.
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are a couple of things that were important in the collaborations. You know, the partnership with UPMC Mägi is helpful because they also have a network of nonprofit organizations in the Pittsburgh area which are sort of related to these topics. So there's like the Pittsburgh Bereavement Organization and like Pittsburgh Doulas and all sorts of places there. The Jewish Fertility Foundation of Pittsburgh also is a connection in there. So the locations thing, I'm trying to really think about spreading out the locations so that you know, if we're going to have a performance in Oakland, which is pretty where we are right now, that there's another performance in a neighborhood 20 minutes away in one direction and 30 minutes away in another direction. So to make geography, to limit that barrier, or to lessen that barrier for access in terms of geography. I'm working with, in the post-concert conversation, a lot of those organizations, those nonprofits, will be available for sort of the larger like resources and debriefing things that will happen in those October concerts. So we're setting aside time for people to engage after the concert and sort of seek out resources or learn things in that respect. The other things that I'm working for, and this is true to Agorita's mission, they never charge admission fees for their concerts. All of their concerts are free, and that, so for the concert that's Mägi, for instance, Mägi will cover all of the parking fees for using their parking garage. I will use some of my funding to pay for childcare. So if people have children and they don't have easy access to childcare, or the timing of it doesn't work out, they will have free access to childcare so they can attend the concert and not have to sort of make it any more difficult to show up than just showing up. And so a lot of those partnerships are coming from thinking about how do we just make the hour or the 2 hours, if you go to the pre and post concert things, as easy to attend as possible, because I think it's not an easy thing to attend in the first place. There's some conversations too about like alternate seating, and so, right, if anybody wants to get up in this format of a concert, you have to like walk past people, and so we're thinking about redesigning the concert space, so if you feel like you're a person who might need to step out of the room, that you can sit in a place where you're not walking past anybody in the middle of a musical moment to do that. So.
Thank you so much, Kate. We're going to applaud for her again. If you have more burning questions, just flag her down.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in. We've got the coffee break now, so you can go and provocate during the coffee break if you have questions that you weren't able to ask. Sorry that we couldn't get to everyone. And then I ask you to all look at the program, because we've got the talking circles. So look at the talking circle themes, pick which one sort of inspires you or links most to your work, and go to that room. We've got our great emerging scholars in there. And it's a great way to meet people. So let me know if you have any questions. If you haven't signed up for the case study tomorrow, come and do that. Before they all fill up.
And come to the concert this afternoon.
Oh yes, and come. It's going to be fantastic.
Please. The concert's at 5:30, doors open at 5 o'clock.
Coming from St. Louis.
That's the worst. And you did not have a transition moment between her and somebody else?
I actually watched you on advisor at I'm so excited. Yes. Yeah. We had the conference there. For sure. But also, you know, I mean, it's already not. That is so good. I mean, I don't think my audience just not. My audience. I know. Even that, like actually being a parent, has to go with her and everything. Just so challenging. And yeah, you know what I mean. And even with oh, great. Okay.
Anywhere I go out.
Right. Right. And especially like
Me too, I think. Okay, I was wondering about that and then go into the water and see. Even though it's 10 minutes.
Oh, you're good.
Say, and rounding it off with the like, I don't
I just wanted to introduce you. I just met Hannah. She works in educational programming at the University in St. Louis, and knows Annika. So we just hired. So Anne and the organizers of the conference, and we worked really closely with Annika. And so she's done so much.
We are so excited about her. She's a new historian who's coming in the fall.
Really hired. Right?
Yeah. Oh, she's absolutely wonderful. Like, she literally, she's the best history advisor an undergraduate student could ever have. And then, like, even after, like, I graduated, like, we talk about God all the time. So, she's great. And she's just so
Yes. Yeah. And a new chair and Holocaust studies. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and it's great they came to this conference. Yeah, they're trying to do more arts projects.
Yeah, well, maybe grad study happens here.
It might.
So we already have one. So we already got a grad student coming to work with Monica and with me. So like the first one we submitted is history.
Yeah, so if I have my master's in art history and I'm looking at history for PhD, we'll see when that all happens. So I was trying to get the museum experience under my belt first, and then.
With art and history. And we have a lot of undergraduates or BFA. Anyway, but
we're very balkanized with CMA, you know that, right? We're like,
yeah,
the way we describe ourselves. Five ships, all roughly floating in the same direction. It's kind of hard to get into the other ships.
We can
I think I know more about Chicago than oh gosh. Yeah.
I hope I can hear the music.
Yeah. We were telling you about it, but hearing him talk about it extensively instead of the 5-minute update. And also hearing the music and like understanding the music and
Who did this? I just said, you know that I didn't know. I have to see my picture. I looked at it. I realized it's the point.
Yeah. That was Tamsin. It's beautiful, isn't it? Or Tamsin Gilbert, the Australian. Okay. Or somebody on her team. Yeah. And the first one they said was attentive, listening, and everything. Hi, Julia. Good to see you.
Yeah, I'm here with Sage Prakash.
Hi.
Who was my MFA student some time ago, and now we're working on a project with
Hi, when
people with disabilities. Yeah, I was excited to see your name. Wow. Oh, Wendy's organizing the whole thing. Yeah.
Sort of. The story he told us is not how I remember. I know. It's not like we went like, we'll do it. Yes. We reached out to us and we're like, we're looking for somebody to host this conference. And take a phone call and was like, First I reached out to other people and was like, this is legit. Exactly, because you never know, right? And then they do all the work. It's fun. It's actually really good. Anyway, we'll have a better day. We're going to invite you to have a help you out.
It's fun. Yeah, we went the second time.
Nice to meet you in 3 dimensions.
2019 I was in Lisbon, Portugal, and so my colleague and I was doing something.
This room was just renovated.
Portugal, right? Not a bad idea. We had some. Yes, I heard.
I know, and I was like, am I going to agree?
Yeah.
Organize an entire.
Yeah, no kidding. I think it's in June, so it's not too hot yet. Really good to see you. We're leaving tomorrow. Yeah, we're in this project eventually.
You have the same project that we're ready to go.
Today, and so really for 2 days.
We're trying to make it up.
Okay.
Concert.
Excellent.
That's so good. Yeah. See you. Not right now.
We'll want to double check.
So I'm right now engaged in doing a series of dictates, similar to what you guys did, but different. But it's 4 volumes. We're working with So the 3 of us are putting together a 4-volume series on. I keep thinking of you and Cindy because, like, as we work on this,
It's all yours.
You guys also have really long chapters.
Like 10,000 words.
Yeah.
Remember that? Yeah.
Yeah. Ours are like they're shorter essays, but they're also a lot of each.
Oh my goodness.
In the fall, it's really long.
Just remind you.
4 volumes. Yeah.
Someone came in like so short. I mean, you guys are smart because you chose people who could already write. And we had a lot of
It's not like a button push goes down. Get it back. Alright.
So yeah, I thought about you a lot. I thought, okay, I should take a bit of that.
So what is the topic of your?
So this is it's 4 volumes on women's innovations in
And you will really enjoy this
performance. And each volume focuses on a different role. So there's the first volume is performers. Second volume is creators, directors, dramaturs, writers. Third volume is focused on designers and makers. And the 4th volume is contribution. So we tried to kind of think about not kind of chronological history, but rather one that kind of thinks about contribution and innovation. Culturally, so it's
Yeah, that's exciting.
which is great.
Yeah, translations.
I know, but there's a lot of that. Just also a lot of especially
As far as plugging in, it should be. I'm gonna leave this
writing about
live. But what you can.
That sounds super exciting though.
Yeah.
Not as much.
Right. Oh, I mean, it's like, and the editors for that volume really had to do a lot of work on writing. So we're getting
Just a little plug in.
stuff that's
If you
kind of never been written about.
Yeah, that's really exciting.
for any laptop.
A lot of work.
So we're just a lot of work.
Yeah.
Trying to get it to a place.
I've got one.
So,
We're in the midst of something similar. So just helping a little bit with technical editing. I'm working on a
shouldn't need to
collection.
adjust them.
I won't touch anything in the
So I
session.
think I'll leave that on if you want to turn this off.
Performing resistance to
Other than that should.
And then just plug it in.
something that's other. So I'm working with my colleague.
That's super.
Alright.
She's in Canada.
Yeah.
She writes on the outside. So we started in 2022 before graduation.
No, he will
And
come
then
back.
I went to Israel to present. We were there for that. It was so controversial. It was this movie filled with Ukrainian scholars and talking about Russia and this out there. And in Europe it's a little different. But we just kept persevering, and we was we have contributors from Hungary and Poland and Finland.
So again, a translation issue.
And translation issue, and not only translation issue, but it's kind of a different style, the way they write or the way they present their ideas, and but I think it's almost it'll be great. It'll be a really great collection. But I hear you. It's like, oh,
So now you also you're in Florida. Were you?
No,
I'm
she's in New
graduating
Hampshire.
from, but yeah, I'm in New Hampshire right now.
Oh, you're in New Hampshire. Okay.
Yeah, director of education at the theater.
Oh, in which theater?
The New London Barn Playhouse.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thanks.
Terrific. What a terrific thing to be doing.
Yeah, it's exciting because my current position, it's very artistically exciting, but doesn't have a lot of scholarship, and so it's exciting.
Yeah. So did you did a theater degree?
Yeah, theater for young audiences,
Okay.
MFA.
Great. Fantastic. Sounds like you landed in a really good place.
Yeah.
I'm really excited to.
So you guys are presenting later
much.
today?
We're presenting later today because we've been working on this project. This is the 3rd iteration that we're working on. We're sort of creating. We call it inclusive creative space, kind of a generalized title, but we work with young adults with intellectual disabilities, and we were fortunate to get some funding to do this kind of work, and we got funding again this year. even though in Florida the word inclusive
Yeah.
does not exist anymore.
Yeah,
I don't think
yeah,
Pittsburgh
yeah,
is
yeah.
There yet. But
No,
I
we're
really
not.
have to go through the
We're still-
handbook
we're
to
still
even,
removing it from a lot of things.
Yeah.
But-
Diversity, inclusion, those words, they're not in our
No,
vocabulary.
whatever, it's engagement and belonging. It's just
Yeah, there you go.
It's like,
belong.
whatever you call it, you know.
Exactly, as long as you can do the same work.
Yeah, so that's what we're presenting on this. And it's really interdisciplinary because we involve musicians, visual artists. So we had a great puppeteer this time who came and had a workshop. Something different,
I'll try to
creative.
get I'm sure, I think I saw your name because I was like, oh, that's the one I'm going to go to. All right, well,
Wonderful.
I'm going to go get a cup of coffee, I think.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Yeah, I was looking at one of the conferences, ACR, maybe a couple of
I
years
have not
ago.
been at ACR in a very long time.
She said,
Well, the thing is, it's like in November when I usually travel for Thanksgiving, it's fantastic. That was great. Are those for Arboreta?
Yeah.
Good, good. That's it, better too for them to take.
Too many hands. Or not enough hands. Too many things and not enough
Well, you
hands.
can put some of the bags inside the other bag.
That's where I'm
That's
going.
That's the beauty of a bag, is that it can hold bags.
I have so many bags and bags in my life. Most of my life is bags inside of bags.
Well, I think I take 150 of those, and there's only 100 people at the conference, so. What else? This could be another thing, but these at least I can like put in a drawer.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. All right, I'm gonna go.
I thought that was a fantastic talk. And I feel like
It really stressed me out, man.
Well, I feel like Anna and I were talking about this, that like, you know, even though we've worked with you for 2 years, that like I now understand this project in a very more holistic way.
Yeah.
Like to hear the music and have you. I love the fact that you kind of like walked us through how to listen to this piece.
Yeah.
Because I think often, you know, people who listen to music like music, but they don't know what's going on with it, and that you kind of gave us a sense of like, you know, patterns to listen to, for, and the way in which it's, I don't know, it's just.
Yeah, and
I love that kind of
the
thing.
pre-concert, like, so the stuff in between the movements does that a little bit, but then also like when there's pre-concert, like the pre-concert stuff will be like how to listen to the piece, and the post-concert will be like the research side of it. So.
No, you